Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Happy New Year. We are starting 2019 off with a phenomenal interview. Our conversation today is with Luke Reynolds. He is the author of Fantastic Failures, True Stories of People Who Changed the World by Falling Down First. Hey, for all the authors that are listening out there, I wanted to share with you this great email that we received here at the Reading with Your Kids podcast from Dr. Linda Mubarak. She is a past guest and the author of Maxine's New Job. Here's the email. Dear Fatima and Jed, good news! Maxine's New Job has been nominated to receive the prestigious Henri Award at the 2018 Christian Literacy Awards for Outstanding Literacy Work in the Children's Book Division. I sincerely believe your certifying Maxine as a great read helped bring increased social media attention to the book. Thank you for the exposure and the great marketing. We are so happy for Dr. Linda Mubarak that her book, Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read, Maxine's New Job, received this prestigious recognition. We would love to help your book receive that same kind of recognition. If you are interested in having your book considered for our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program, please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can click on the contact button, send us a note, and we'll send all the information back to you. Or you can go right to our Certified Great Read page on our website. It's fun, it's easy, and it is really an effective way to let the world know that your book stands out above all the rest. The Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program. Joining us on the line right now from beautiful Beverly in Massachusetts. And I know it's beautiful because I've been there a whole lot. It really is a beautiful community. Our guest today is the author of a number of fantastic books. And today we're talking about his book entitled Fantastic Failures, True Stories of People Who Changed the World by Falling Down First. Please welcome to the show, Luke Reynolds. Luke, how are you?
Hey, doing great, Jed. Thank you so much for having me on.
We're speaking to Luke. Luke is in his teaching office right now, and he looks so official and so much better than I do in my hoodie and down in my subterranean basement. I love the premise of the book, Fantastic Failures. Just that the message that failure is part of success.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, it's as a teacher, when I taught middle school for a lot of years, and I just felt like it was a message that, you know, it got a lot of talk sometimes, but really seeing the failures of other people didn't. And, you know, we might say, hey, it's okay to fail, you know, try again. But nobody really wants to talk about the failures that we experience or people we know experience. And so I felt like it was really fun to see these failures of beautiful, amazing people. And that was my big drive.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to get in finding out some of those failures and some of those beautiful people who fail. But first, I think that's a really important message for kids in middle school. And I think it's also just as important for the parents of kids in middle school.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me that we've, I don't know if it's one generation, two generations, but it seems like there's been, you know, these generations of kids who've grown up, and some of them are almost bubble wrapped.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
The parents are so protective. They don't want you know, the score being kept during, you know, sporting events. They don't want their kids to fail or get a skinned knee or anything. And I don't think it's helpful.
Yeah. And it is, you know, one of the most interesting conversations with my seventh graders, we used to do this thing called scar stories, and kids would share stories of their scars. And it was always just as a teacher, I loved it because it worked on public speaking and conversation connection and even storytelling and narrative structure. But kids' eyes would light up when they could tell stories about their scars. And they, you know, they're hard to go through, but once we go through these moments that are tough, they empower us, they build our identity, and they become part of who we are. And I think those moments if we've got people to support us through them, are far more important than the victories and the successes we have. They're beautiful. When things go well and some good stuff happens, it's great. But going through something hard and knowing that there's people there to support you through that can be such an empowering experience. And I find that kids, like you're saying, we need to experience it. Kids need to experience it. And it is really an important part of finding our identity, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that idea, that scar stories, telling our scar stories. I think you're right. I think it's empowering because you're taking a moment in life that was difficult. Yeah. And you survived it. In fact, that scar is a little bit tougher than the rest of the skin, and you're able to deal with things a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it gives people a chance for kids, especially like for middle school kids, it gives them a chance to figure out, hey, how do I need people? And we don't want to get through this, particularly now, I think with social networking, a lot of middle school kids are believing, hey, all I need is my computer. All I need is online. I just need, my social media friends. But there's a different level of friendship and connection when you go through something tough and you've got people there to support you face to face and be with you. And I think those scar stories are a way of seeing, hey, here's how I went through something really hard. But now I know what a real friend is. Or now I know, I have my dad or my mom or my brother or my cousin, and they were there with me, and I know what it's like to travel through something tough and have someone care for me. And I think that's essential. We need that when we're 90, when we're 50, when we're 12, whatever age.
Absolutely. As someone who's close to 90, I absolutely I absolutely need that. I'm wondering, I've a couple of questions. First, did you get any blowback from parents? Were any parents horrified that their kids came home and said, "Oh, we talked about our scars at school today"?
No, what's interesting is, and as a dad, I have three sons, and I can relate to that idea of not wanting our kids to get hurt. I was always like, when my kids were little and they'd go near the stairs, my heart started racing, like, oh, get there quick. As parents, we don't want to see our kids go through something hard. But usually at the start of the school year, when we had parents' night, I would always frame everything we did in the classroom with that caveat that, hey, we're going to talk about hard stuff and I'm going to push your kids as writers, and, they might always not get the A+. But my goal with it is to support them through it. And once parents hear like, hey, this is not an environment where it's tough love in a sense, like you're going to struggle, period. You're going to struggle, but I'm going to be right there in your corner, believing in you, encouraging you, cheering you on, helping. And I think that twofold approach is something, I think that's something I wish I had growing up, someone that could challenge me and encourage me. And I think sometimes we choose one or the other, as coaches or parents or teachers, we're like, well, if I'm going to, be tough, it's just going to be tough. Or if I'm going to be encouraging, I'm just going to say everything's always great. And I think the middle approach where we say, hey, I want to challenge you and push you, and I want you to embrace struggle, but I'm also going to be right here saying, you got this. You can do this. I'm with you. And I like that twofold approach.
Yeah. It's funny. I have a niece who never saw a skating rink before she was 13. And at 13, she fell in love with hockey. And so she has all this catching up to do. So I took her to her skating lesson, and the coach, he kind of stopped. I think he was worried. I was up in the stands watching, and he came over. He goes, "Look, I have to explain to you. I'm going to push her. I'm going to support her. But she has a lot of potential, so I'm really going to push her. So I don't want you to be up." And I'm like, dude, don't worry about it. I coach. I understand. Go for it. Push her.
Yeah. You almost got to lay the groundwork to be like, hey, I believe in her, but it's going to be tough. And yeah.
Where am I wrong? Were my parents just cruel and told me, get up, brush it off, walk it off, that kind of, so, I remember playing sports when I was a kid, and you got a bump or you got knocked out, and the message was, get up, walk it off, you're going to be fine. Now, that's not a very healthy attitude to take, but it looks like for a lot of parents who went the opposite direction, and, so that we're overprotective, do you have a sense of when that shift happened, or is my perception incorrect?
No, I think that's spot on. I think with, I feel like with education and with parenting and coaching, we're on the similar sort of pendulum swing. In education, it was kind of in the early 80s, we had the big standards movement, and, we had a nation at risk. This report came out and said, man, our schools are falling behind. Everything's terrible. Hurry. We gotta do better. Everyone's getting better than us. And then schools started to standardize, and it was this huge push for standards. And then the pendulum kind of swung back and it said, whoa, what about art? What about creativity? What about stories? We're losing that. And I think similarly along this line of struggle and this idea of tough love versus also supporting and connecting with kids. And, we have like social emotional learning. And I think the pendulum is kind of going back and forth. And I think the best place to be is this balanced place where we can tell kids like, hey, it's not saying to a kid who got hurt like, hey, it doesn't matter, walk it off. Like, who cares? It's saying like, I think the balance is like, man, that's a tough fall. I see you skin your knee. But I think you can keep going. So it's like almost that recognition, like I see that you've been through something hard, but that doesn't mean, okay, no more baseball. We're done. We're not because you got hurt. And I feel like that balance is a way to connect with kids and say, look, you're not, like a lot of boys are told and seen from a young age, hey, masculinity means like never crying and you just be tough all the time. And I think that's unfair to our boys because they're humans. They got emotions. So helping them say, yeah, you can feel your emotions. You can cry. You can deal with that. But that doesn't mean you don't have to keep trying and keep moving forward. And I think that balanced approach of recognizing when a kid struggles, recognizing it's totally normal, and then keep moving forward, that to me feels like that's what it's all about, and that's what I want for my own kids. That's what I want for my students, just to be able to feel that process of this is really hard. And I think when we tell kids, never mind, they learn if something's really hard, I should just stop. But on the other hand, I don't want kids to feel like when something is really hard, I should just suck it up and pretend I don't feel it. So I like that balance, like recognizing like, yeah, this is tough. This is tough. You didn't get into the college you wanted to. That's tough. But now what are we going to do? Like I recognize it, but now let's keep moving forward.
Exactly. You're still alive. You still have to move forward. And it's great when our kids can experience that and have the support and everything. But it's also great when they can learn from others. And you've created a great book where kids can see, hey, there's that person. They're up there. They seem to have everything, but it wasn't always that way. So why don't you dish a little dirt out and tell us some of the people that you profile in the book, some of those people who are incredibly successful who had a few falls early in their life. Luke will be back to tell us some of the specific people who have changed the world by falling down first. But before that, I'd love to invite you to visit my website, readingwithyourkids.com. When you go there, sign up for our newsletter. The newsletter is free, and when you do sign up for our newsletter, you can download a free digital version of my brand new book, Love That I Matter to You. I love that I matter to you. This was inspired by a conversation I had with my wife and her best friend. Both of them are veteran educators in the Boston Public School system. And the conversation I had with them, well, it inspired me to write this book. And this is a book that is written specifically for your kids to read to you. Because it's filled with messages that you as a parent need to hear. Need to be reminded of, and it's a way for your kids. It's a way for your kids to say thanks to you for all the time and energy that you spend with them. So I would really love it. I'd love for you to join our Reading with Your Kids family by signing up for a free newsletter at readingwithyourkids.com. And of course, when you do, you can get that free digital download of Love That I Matter to You. Dish a little dirt out and tell us some of the people that you profile in the book. Some of those, people who are incredibly successful who had a few falls early in their life.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, that was the real fun of researching for this book. Was I loved seeing, and it started with this question of the people I admire. Like, when did they mess up? What were their struggles and failures? And to a T, without a doubt, every person I started researching there were just so many problems and failures. And so one of my favorites was Albert Einstein, and I started to look back at the primary source material, and his elementary school principal. I mean, this was the coolest thing to find. Albert Einstein's elementary school principal literally said, direct quote, like, this school would be a great place were it not for Albert Einstein. So here he is, this little elementary school kid, and the principal is like, this kid is, hyperactive, he's crazy, he's a huge behavior problem. I essentially, as a principal, as a leader, my school would be great if I could just get this kid kicked out, and that's Albert Einstein. Like, I don't want him, and so he goes on to revolutionize, the way we think and see the world and understand science. And when he was young, he had a very volatile temper, and he threw his piano bench at his piano teacher. He got so frustrated, he just threw it at her. He was so angry. And so here's just this kid who's volatile. He's got a temper. He's hyperactive. The principal sees him as he's a lost case. He just shouldn't even be in the school. And he goes on to create E=mc². And that was just really cool. On the flip side, some of the failures I thought were most profound were, also when people just made bad decisions. And so, you got a guy like Charles Dutton, who was a famous actor. He was in one of my favorite movies, Rudy. He played that janitor. And in real life, as a young man, he was involved in a lot of gang fights, and they called him Rock. He ended up starring in the sitcom Rock. Mm-hmm. But they called him Rock because he didn't have a weapon, so he'd find rocks, and he just literally smash other guys' heads with rocks. And so he got sent to prison. And when he was in prison as a very young man, thinking like, this is it, I'm in jail, that's my life. When he was on his way to solitary confinement one day, he grabbed a book off the library shelf on his way in, and it happened to be a book of plays by African American playwrights. And he says, the line from Charles Dutton, he starts reading this book, and he says, I found my humanity in that cell. He was reading these plays, and it just said his heart caught on fire, and he realized how much he loved these words, these characters speaking so powerfully. So he got out, and he said to the warden, like, I want to start an acting group, a theater group here in the prison. And the warden's like, whoa, what do you mean? And he keeps pushing, and he gets this theater group started, and people eventually come in and see him, and he goes from jail to Yale. It's a great article called From Jail to Yale. And he goes to the Yale School of Theater and begins acting, and then he's on Broadway, and now he's in Hollywood blockbusters. But just a really cool story of a failure in terms of a decision, and kids make really bad decisions sometimes, whether through structural problems in society or their own thinking. But Charles Dutton just made that really bad decision, but he still kind of rose out of the ashes of that to do something beautiful. And so I love those kinds of failures where we see people at their worst, and we also see it doesn't mean they're incapable of becoming their best.
Such a powerful, empowering message, just to, because I think there are so many people who make that huge mistake, and then they just give up and they go, I blew it.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're right. I get middle school kids, sometimes they come to me in 7th grade, and as an English teacher, they say, Mr. Reynolds, I'm not a good writer. And I think to myself, you're only 12. How are you already deciding you're not, you take some writers like William Steig publishing his first children's book at 61, or Frank McCourt winning the Pulitzer Prize in his 70s. How are you at 12 saying you're not a good writer? Where did you internalize that? And like to your point, I think you're right that, we get a bad grade or we fail and we think, well, that's it for that. I guess I'm not supposed to be a writer or a basketball player or whatever. And the truth is, anybody who is any of those things, if we look close enough, has had a lot of failure.
Yes, absolutely. So incredibly important. The premise of the podcast is just that whole reading with your kids and the value of reading with our kids. How valuable do you think it would be if a parent and child or grandparent and child were co-reading this together, or even reading it aloud together, for the parent to kind of sit back and say, these are really fascinating. Do you want to hear about some of the failures I had in my life?
Oh man, I think that, to me, what you just said is the essence of good parenting, of good teaching, is when we can get real honest with our kids and students in the way you're talking about. We're reading with our kids, but then we're not letting the words just stay on the page. We're saying, hey, even a novel, right? Like, here's what this character is going through. Hey, I kind of felt like that when this happened, or I felt lost in it. So I totally love what you said. And I mean, my own son, who's now, my oldest son is 10. A couple years ago, he started doing this weird thing where whenever I would correct him or be like, oh, you got to do this instead, like, he started asking me, well, like, Dad, did you ever make that mistake? And he really wanted to know about the times I messed up. And so I started telling him all these failures, and it was really powerful for both of us. And I think kids want to know that. Like, so we're reading this book, like, hey, let me tell you about this time I got cut from my team, or this time I made a really bad decision and I got, suspended. Or I think those moments help kids feel like, man, so learning is what this thing called life is all about.
Mm-hmm. I love that because I've mentioned this to young parents, and if a young parent ever comes up to me and says, "What advice do you have? Your kids are grown and they're doing well and they're nice kids and everything. What should I do as a parent?" And one of the things I always tell them is, learn how to say I don't know. Learn how to admit that you make a mistake. And I just knew intuitively that was, it's so hard to keep up this image that I'm perfect, and it's unreasonable. But I love the fact that you're helping me understand right now that one of the reasons that's so important is because it helps our kids learn that you can fail, you can make mistakes, and still go on and still have a family, have a career, have a life.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so true. And I love what you said. Just those powerful words, I don't know. Those are so crucial, right? Because I think whatever image we project is also what we tell kids. This is how you've got to be. So if I'm as a teacher, if I have to pretend like I know everything, then I'm modeling that for kids, and then they feel like they got to know everything. And so, like you said, being able to say, I don't know, or that's a great question, or, being honest with those kinds of struggles, I think we model for kids that's life. And we also model authenticity. And I think that's, especially in this day and age where everyone's, sort of has a lot of middle schoolers have their online platform and profile, and which in some ways can be helpful to connect, but other times I think kids end up hiding who they really are. And I think authenticity is something we need to be talking about. So if we can do it when we're reading with our kids, I think that's huge.
Yeah. Boy, I remember sitting down with my son one day when he was in middle school, and a bunch of his friends were over, and I'm like, and they were all fronting. They were all acting like they were not a one of them knew what they were talking about. They were just going around. And I just sat down and goes, none of you guys know anything. And the minute you admit that to yourself, your life will be so much easier.
Yeah. It's such a great point. It really is so true. You're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Well, I want folks to be able to absolutely want to check out Fantastic Failures, true stories of people who changed the world by falling down first. But this isn't your first time at the dance. You have a great library of books that you've created for families and for kids. So tell us your website where folks can go and find out more about Fantastic Failures, and also your other books, Surviving Middle School or Call to Creativity.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Thank you. It's just www.lukewreynolds.com. And I always feel like, I don't know if you feel like this as a writer too, Jay, because you've written a ton of stuff. I always write out of this, when you have a question and you wonder, and you start writing out of this place of wonder and curiosity, and then and that's where I think a lot of the stories and the ideas come from is, not kind of like what we're talking about. We don't know something. Let's write a story about it. Or we don't, we encounter a tough situation. Let's watch a character deal with that and see what happens. And it's kind of a fun thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those questions, kind of being able to take off that mask, that I know everything mask, and just take it off and go, I wonder, how does this happen? What if?
Yeah.
What a great
Those beautiful questions. Yeah. And questions I think that hopefully our kids can ask instead of just, what's the right answer, also the what if. And like you said, I think that's huge. Yeah.
If before I let you go, if you had a magic wand and you were the sorcerer of education, what would you do? How would you change education or the way we teach kids that would better allow for kids to ask those questions?
Man, that's a great question, and that's awesome. I mean, a couple things that I would do right away. One, every class would be 12 kids, no more than 12 kids in a class. Because if, we're trying to get kids comfortable with struggle and challenge, that's also got to be done in the context of relationships. So 12 kids to a class instead of 25 or 30 is going to let that teacher do more with those kids, interact more, challenge them, and in a much more personal way with writing, with math, with other things. So that's one thing I would do. And I think there's money in the system to do it if we change what we're spending on. But I would make 12 kids to a class. The other thing I would do is get kids outside every day at every level of education. They've got to get outside the classroom. So that means more field trips. They got to go and visit places like the textile factories in Lowell, Massachusetts. They got to walk through those halls and touch those walls and see what life was like. That's just so crucially important, instead of just sitting at a desk taking notes and regurgitating for a test. So a lot more field trips, smaller classes, and then a lot of outdoor time just being outside. So if in an art class, we're going to take that art class outside. More activities that involve, if they're doing history, maybe they're going to look at the way a militia is set up in the Revolutionary War, but they're going to go outside and stand in the formation to see what it felt like in the winter to be in December fighting in the militia for the United States, or those kinds of things. So I'd make it as real as possible. More time outside, more field trips, smaller classes.
Well, I'm going to do my best to talk to my magician friends and see if we can get you that magic wand, because, dude, that is, my wife has been a teacher for 30 years, and it's such a challenge, and teaching is such a challenging thing, but it's so very, very important. And those sound like fantastic suggestions. So we're going to do our best to make that happen.
Oh, thanks, Jed.
Well, we want you all to check out Fantastic Failures, True Stories of People Who Changed the World by Falling Down First, and also check out the website, LukeWReynolds.com. Luke, I've had a blast speaking to you. I know you must have a project in the works now. Is there something you can come back and tell us about in a few months?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm working on a young adult novel right now. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Awesome. Luke Reynolds, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being on the show, Luke.
Jed, thank you. And thanks for all you do for kids and books.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Shannon Morris. She is the author of MC Veggie Fresh Rocks the Mic. She is an author. She's also a licensed nutritionist, and she's also a rapper. She's going to rap. She's going to talk to us about how we can inspire our kids to eat healthy and to learn more about nutrition and all that great stuff. It is a phenomenal show. You are not going to want to miss it. Hey, if you're the author and you'd love to come on the Reading with Your Kids podcast, we'd love to have you being a guest. It's fun, it's easy, and it is absolutely free. All you need to do is to go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, click on the contact button, let us know about your great book. We'll let you know the next steps. Hey, I want to thank Luke Reynolds for joining us today, and we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much for allowing your child to fail and to grow from that failure. Allowing your child to fail and being there to help them feel safe and to know that they can try again. And of course, thank you so much for taking the time to read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.